Hello and welcome back. Now in this video, as usual, just like how we've done so far in the auth service, the notification service, we want to add just one unit test, and the unit test will be added only to the buyer's get controller. Okay, so we add it to this buyer get controller. We just test these methods to make sure that they are sending the correct response. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is inside the controller's buyer, then we're going to create a folder. I'll call the folder tests, and then inside the test folder I'll create another folder called mocks. Okay, we will need the same mocks we created in the auth service, so copy the content of your auth mock. Okay, and then go to the mocks folder. I'll call this buyer.mock.ts. We are just going to make some changes. Okay, so here it's going to be buyer mock. Okay, and yes, it's going to be buyer mock response. Okay, and I think here maybe we can remove this, because for the buyer we are not the buyer only has get, so we don't need request body. Okay, so we are only passing request params or whatever we need to pass, but we don't need any request body. Okay, and then we need the IJWT. We don't need the auth mock. Okay, we need the iauth payload, and then another property I want to add, probably I'll say export interface iparams. Okay, and then the params is going to be username, optional, and it's going to be of type string. Now this params, I'm going to use it here instead of unknown. I will use params right here. Then every other thing will remain the same. Like I said, the reason why there is no body, we're not using a body, is because our buyer requests, they are only get requests. Okay, so there is nowhere where you can see right here, there is no get, there is no body, request.body. We're only getting from request.current_user or request.params. Okay, and let's add, we are going to use the same auth mock. Let's see, let me go back to the mock. I think we need the auth mock. Let's see. Okay, so we have to create that. Okay, I think probably instead of auth mock, I will create buyer documents. Okay, so I'll change this to buyer documents, and this will be buyer documents. Now let's start changing. This is going to be _ID, and it's going to be a string. You can add some strings, alphanumeric strings. Okay, then we need a username, profile public ID, and we can take that out. So we can add a username, we can add an email, country, profile picture. We don't need this, so I will set is seller. I'll set it to false. Okay, and then purchased gigs. I'll set it to an empty array. Okay, created that. Then I don't need all of this. Okay, and this is going to be a buyer document. Okay, so just add these properties. Okay, we can set a different created at time. Let's remove what we don't need. Okay, so this is going to be our mock. Now let's just create the test file. So inside this test folder, I'll create get.test.ts. Okay, and as usual, we'll need to add to mock some properties. Okay, so I'll call just.mock. We need to mock our buyer service. So let me get the service part. I think we need request response, so I'll import request response. We need our buyer service, I'll mock that. And then we need our helpers. Let's see if we're using it here. Okay, I'll mock the helpers and possibly Elasticsearch. So at Elasticsearch slash Elasticsearch. Okay, and then we are going to create our describe, top level describe, and this is going to be buyer controller. Okay, and then we add a callback. Then we set the before each. Okay, before each test is run or executed, just dot restore all mocks, and then after each we clear all mocks. So this is going to be after each, and this is going to be clear all mocks. Okay, if you are using timers, you can do the same as well. And we are only going to test this email, current user, and username methods. Okay, so it's going to be very easy, it's going to be very simple. So what we want to do is just, if this gets buyer by email returns an actual result, then we expect this to send the correct response. Okay, so I can do that here. I'll say describe, and then this is going to be email method, and then let me add the block or the callback, and then here I can say, I can use the it. I say it should return buyer profile data. Now what I want to do is I will only test the case whereby it returns an actual data. You can go ahead and test the case if it doesn't return, if it returns null. You can test the null case. So I will only test the buyer document, but you can test the null case. So if you test the null case, then buyer should value should be null. Okay, and then here let us go ahead and get our requests of type requests equal to buyer mock request. We don't need the session data right here, so we don't we can set session to empty. We need a current, we can pass this current user, and current user we are going to get from iauth payload. Okay, so auth user payload, and then here is going to be auth user payload. We can import as unknown as request. Okay, and then let's get our response. So this is going to be response equal to buyer mock response. Okay, and now we want to spy on this method. So we want to spy on this method and make it return the buyer documents. Okay, so I'll say just.spy on, and we need to get, I will get all. I'll say import all as buyer from buyer service. Okay, from buyer service. Yeah, I'll fix this one later. So now we have all the methods here, and then the one that we need is the, or rather here, gets you buyer by email, and then dot mock resolved value, and we want it to return the buyer document. Okay, so we want it to return the buyer document. Like I said, I'm only testing the case where it returns an actual document. You can test if it returns null. Okay, so the next thing is call this method email. Okay, so I'm going to call it here. I'll say await email. It will take request and response. Okay, and now import this as well, and then here we expect res.status to have been called with 200. okay, because that is what is called here 200, the status code. So we expect it, if it returns the buyer document, then it should be called with 200, and then we expect the JSON dots to have been called with. Now we expect it to have been called with the document message buyer profile, and then buyer should be of type buyer documents. Okay, so this is what we expect. This is only the success case if this method returns an actual document. Now if it returns null, I will leave that to you for you to take care of. Just try it out. It's very simple. This should just return null, and then you expect this to be null. Okay, so that is the case for that is the other case. Okay, we can then go ahead and run this. Okay, so let me just stop this and then run the command npm run test. Okay, I have an error. I think this is the wrong import. It should be at Elastic, not at Elasticsearch. So at Elastic/Elasticsearch. Okay, probably you saw that. You can fix the error if you have the error as well. So I'll run the test again. Now, while the test is running, for the other methods, it's just similar. All I just need to do is duplicate this, pass it here, and this is going to be the current user method. So current user, and then it's going to be get buyer by buyer username. That is what I'm going to use here, and then I expect it to be, and then the function is going to be current user. Okay, and then I can import it, and then the last one, the last method. Okay, the last method should be username. So username method, and get buyer by username, and it should also return. Let me change this. Okay, so we go ahead and check. Let's check. Okay, the test was successful. Let me run it again since I've added the other parts. Okay, so there is just a very simple test just to check what happens if it actually returns a document. Okay, we expected the status code to be 200, and then it should send this JSON object. Okay, and here there's an issue. Okay, there's an issue right here, and I need to fix it. So the issue is because this username requires request.params.username. It requires us to set the username in the params. And remember, we already have params object, and we are passing in the username. To fix that is very easy. So here, after the auth payload, you can pass an object with username, and then you set whatever username you want to test with. Okay, so it requires this params username property. Okay, so I'll go ahead and run the test again. Okay, so run this again. Okay, so you can see all three tests passed. Okay, so now with this, we just have the simple test that we want to implement in our user service.